a state where the conversation about guns is as complex as the landscape itself. Here, gun rights and regulations are at the heart of ongoing debates that span urban to rural communities, personal freedoms, and public safety concerns. The parents and students of North Carolina deserve better. But what is the answer? In recent years, gun violence has been an important issue in the United States, specifically in North Carolina. Firearm-related deaths have risen by 27% since 2014, according to NCDPH. The effectiveness of these laws is tested in the face of these issues, and as more incidents happen, we must question if these laws are protecting us or if they are covering up their failure to protect the people. Government leaders think that increasing the strictness of gun laws will fix the problem, when in reality it only makes the situation worse. Despite North Carolina's implementation of gun laws to reduce gun violence, the state continues to experience high amounts of gun-related incidents due to inadequate background checks and loopholes that allow dangerous people to obtain guns. They are not effective and fail to keep us safe from ourselves and other irresponsible weapon owners. We need a way to stop these tragedies without restricting our Second Amendment rights as Americans. It starts with the current generation. Gun ownership in North Carolina has deep historical roots tied to its colonial militia system and the practical need for firearms in hunting and self-defense. During the colonial and early statehood periods, able-bodied men were required to serve in militias, making firearm ownership common and largely unregulated. After the Civil War, Reconstruction-era laws and black codes sought to restrict gun ownership for freed African Americans, reflecting a broader racial and political agenda to suppress their rights. These discriminatory practices set a precedent for gun laws that, for much of the 20th century, selectively limited access to firearms. In modern times, North Carolina's gun laws have shifted toward expanding gun rights while maintaining some regulatory measures. The state adopted concealed carry laws in 1995 and expanded self-defense protections under the Castle Doctrine in 2011. However, repealing the pistol purchase permit requirement in 2023 marked a significant deregulation, simplifying access to handguns. Gun ownership remains a culturally significant issue in North Carolina, especially in rural areas, while debates over firearm regulation reflect ongoing tensions between public safety concerns and Second Amendment rights. In North Carolina, the issue of gun laws is as deep into the state's culture as its history. Since the beginning of North Carolina's history, there have been many laws regarding guns. Understanding these laws is crucial to assessing their effectiveness in stopping gun violence and promoting safety. The most concerning aspect of gun laws in North Carolina is that although individuals must obtain a concealed carry permit, laws such as the ones passed by Senate Bill 41 directly allow for the open carry of handguns, specifically without a permit, in most public spaces, including educational and religious places. This was a recent law that was passed by the NC Senate and repealed Article 52A of Chapter 14 of the General Status, which required the purchase of a permit or concealed carry to buy a pistol. Senate Bill 41 allows for the open carry of guns in schools and religious places. Just as important as these laws is what goes behind them. So how are these laws actually relating to preventing gun violence? According to the NCV's presentation, Safe North Carolina 2020, the 2015 U.S. firearm mortality rate was over 11 times higher than in other high-income countries, and of all firearm deaths among high-income countries that year, 83.7% were in the U.S. No other high-income country in the world even comes close to the U.S. So clearly change is needed, as this isn't a statistic you want your country to be on. And the worst part is, as the presentation mentioned, according to 2018 statistics, every day we stand idle, we lose an average of 3.9 lives per day, the 7th highest out of the 50 US states. Out of those 3.9 lives lost daily, what are the chances it's someone you love? What if all you needed to do was advocate for a bill in order to save their life? 3.9 lives a day is over 1,400 people a year, which is a huge amount of people just in our local state. Just think about this for a second. There's only one thing that you truly need, and that is your life. These gun violence laws could not be more important to tighten as they impact our loved ones' safety. Gun control in North Carolina isn't all about the safety of the people. Although many people argue that the gun control laws that are currently in place and some that are still being added are creating an unsafe environment for the people of North Carolina, especially children who attend schools. There is another group of people who believe that gun laws are crucial for protecting individuals' Second Amendment rights. While parents of students are the ones who generally believe that gun laws should be more restrictive of gun owners and enact many precautions against obtaining a gun, it is usually the people who already have a gun who are more passionate about laws protecting their Second Amendment rights of owning a gun. However, there are also exceptions to this. For example, Officer Kellen, a police officer currently posted as the head officer for Green Level High School, said that.
Obviously there's gaps and everything, nothing's like airtight. What regulations do you think you can put in to prevent majority of the firearm crimes in, at least in NC?
I don't know if there's anything I don't think there's anything that you can put in place that will prevent everything. I do like, I don't know how familiar you are with red flag laws, but that deals with like mental illness, doing background checks. I'm all for that. I think that's great. I think it's, I don't have any problem with also requiring a permit to purchase a handgun, which North Carolina did away with last year. So now you're no longer having to get a handgun permit to buy a handgun. I don't know why they did that. I think I'm an owner of a handgun other than the one I have on me. I had to get a permit when I got one. I'm fine with that. I don't have a problem. But I think background checks are vitally important to do our best in trying to keep firearms out of people's hands that don't need them.
Correct me if I'm wrong. In private gun sales, background checks
There's a loophole, right?
There's a loophole. So, do you think there's any preventative measures we can take or anything that we can put in place?
Yes, we could probably do away with that loophole. But I think the problem with that is one side gives a little, then the other side feels that, and so that's why I think that loophole's never gone away. It's because one side goes, well, we're not going to give an inch. We're not going to do away with that because every time we do, then you come in and you want to put in more laws. So I think that's the problem. It's a political thing, right? So I think that's the problem. But I 100% agree that loophole should be out. That a private sale can happen between two individuals, and there's no background check or anything done on those two individuals when the one purchasing it. That's a problem. Right.
In a documentary on gun sales and background checks, Richard Hudson, a Republican representative from North Carolina, argues that the real issue isn't the lack of background checks, but rather the flaws in how the system is implemented. According to Hudson in the Congressional Digest, he points to the case of his colleague, Gabrielle Giffords, who was shot by a legal gun owner who passed a background check. Hudson suggests that the tragedy happened because the FBI didn't check all relevant databases, which would have revealed the shooter's past run-ins with the law involving weapons. For Hudson, the problem lies in inefficient information sharing between agencies, not the background checks themselves. He believes that improving data integration and enforcement is key, rather than expanding regulations. However, critics argue that stronger background checks are still necessary to prevent dangerous individuals from obtaining firearms in the first place. Recent crimes in NC depict a scene out of a horror movie, with the crime rate and violence being at such a high level. For example, in Raleigh, documented by the Associated Press, 5 died in a mass shooting, including a police officer. This shows the need for a reconstruction of our gun laws. This incident impacted the local community as well as more broad stakeholders of the ineffective gun control regulations. Law enforcement officers have said, en route, that gun violence is their #1 priority. Still, the rates remain high. Data from North Carolinians Against Gun Violence, NCGV, shows the state's recordings of firearm-related fatalities, which include homicides and suicides. This data ranges from 2016 to 2018. The stats from the NCGV show that in the year 2018 alone, there were more than 1,400 gun-related deaths here in NC. This number is unacceptable. This shows the severity of the consequences of the lack of regulations. These laws allow the wrong people to get their hands on guns. Each number on that sheet represents another family which is broken just because people don't want to take the time to make laws stricter and regulations more thorough.
As a parent and teacher, how do you feel about the protection of your students and children relating to gun violence?
I guess, personally, I'm against, I'm not against people owning guns, but the type of guns and the availability of them are very concerning, and also the lack of prerequisites or knowing, if there are mental health issues or previous issues of violence or other things like that that could prevent people that are not in a good space to have a gun, or the type of guns, or there's no reason for anyone to have a semi-automatic weapon. People say they need them for hunting, and that is just ridiculous. So my concern is more, I think that there's too many of them out there for in the U.S. and they're not used appropriately, and there's a concern for that's what people jump to. Whereas how can they, if there's a disagreement, how can they settle it?
Overall, do you believe gun control is effective in North Carolina, especially in schools and other public places?
I don't think it's effective in the whole United States. I think we've gone so far, and people using the excuse that it's their right, but what it's causing is a lot of senseless deaths.
Even though gun control regulations are mostly ineffective, there is hope. Lawmakers can offer stricter background checks along with background checks for private sales, bans on types of firearms, waiting periods, and more. In fact, it has been shown that states like Rhode Island, which require background checks for private sales, have lower firearm deaths per capita. An article by World Populations Review shows that Rhode Island has 5.83 gun deaths per capita, while North Carolina, a state with no background check for private sales, has a 17.4 gun death per capita. However, there will always be ways around the law. Illegal guns will still be obtainable, but we can mitigate a majority of it. Opponents of stricter gun control say that gun restrictions are not taking into account the root cause of violence. But if guns were less accessible, then violence would decrease. Mental health issues are one thing, but the reason we see outcomes are because how people aren't doing what's right and regulations are weak. Despite the arguments about who is right or wrong, what is important is the safety of our residents. NC lawmakers have to make it more efficient. Then smaller issues within it can be solved. As North Carolina grapples with its gun laws, the question remains, how do we ensure that our rights are preserved while making sure our communities are safe? The debate over gun ownership and regulation is far from over, and as the state moves forward, one thing is certain: the conversation will continue to shape the future of North Carolina. Lives are being lost every day because of our loose laws, and we need to change these ineffective laws as soon as we can. Gun control laws in North Carolina are clearly not working, as we've been having mass deaths compared to not only our country, but the entire world. We need to put our natural right to life above our right to bear arms, and tighten these laws to minimize deaths. What if the next of the thousands per year in North Carolina was your brother or your mom? Changing these laws would save lives. As voting citizens, we all have an opportunity to stand up for what's right and keep our families safe, and should do as much as we can. It's our responsibility to keep our communities safe.